Okay, in this one, I am going to take you back to 2011 or 2012. This is going to cover a 33-day canoe expedition across northern Quebec and Labrador. And on this trip, we actually would live off the land more than I ever really have on any trip before it or since. I mean, we really relied on hunting, fishing, and foraging skills to get us through this trip, and as well as serious navigation. There's no portage trails. We're doing hardcore compass bearing led bushwhack portages, and on this trip we had 2 portages that took us over 2 days in and of themselves just for those portages. So it's a very, very challenging route. And the route is the Adlatok via the Dupas and George rivers. This was a very special year for me because I had actually just gotten off of 2 other serious expeditions. I was commissioned by Field and Stream magazine to do a hardcore Arctic snowmobile expedition where we rode skidoos from the Mackenzie River to Uluhukto, which is 300 miles north of the Arctic Circle and further north in all of Alaska and the Arctic Archipelago. And then we did a trip, an ATV trip on the Canoe Trail, which is a defunct World War II pipeline road where there's no bridges, it crosses many rivers, all the bridges are washed out, there's old Ford trucks from the war era lying in there, and we tried to finish this thing on ATVs, and literally I left for this trip immediately when I got back.
I'm Jim Baird, and welcome to Emerald Junction. This is the first stop on a long and lonely train ride to Schefferville, Quebec. About 4 hours to the put-in for our month-long canoe trip all the way to the Labrador Sea.
If you can see in the video, I don't have a lot of fat on me. Times change a little. We start this trip with a train ride that takes us to a frontier town.
I'm Marty Yanovich, and this is my homemade canjo. Oh, Susanna, don't you cry for me.
Like from here and here. Here we are at Adventure Tunalik near Schefferville, Quebec, and this will be the last outpost of civilization before we head into the northern Quebec and Labrador frontier. People here have been really helpful. They've helped us with our tags, they put us up for the night, and they're giving us a shuttle about an hour and a half to Iron Arm of Atticamagen, where our adventure will finally begin after 4 days of travel.
You know, there's no connecting roads out of Schefferville, so the only way in there is a train, but there are some roads in the community, but it is not on the road system as in an organized system of interconnecting roads.
Hey, I'm Ted Baird, and we're on our way to our put-in on the Iron Arm. Our buddies at Tunalik Adventures have set us up, put us up for the night, treated us like kings, and we're out there and we're ready to start our trip.
I am Will Wilkinson.
here with the Baird brothers, northern Quebec, close to Schefferville.
This is the beginning of the trip. There's no turning back now. First thing we got to deal with is Lake Atticamagen. It's very big, very difficult to navigate. Lots of points, lots of islands, but we got our GPS, we got our compasses, and we got our topographic maps. And definitely we got our fishing rods. Look at this puppy. This is going to pull in a lake trout, probably bigger than you.
As soon as we put our canoes into Atticamagen, we are back in Labrador. The Quebec-Labrador border follows a height of land, and what a height of land is a point in elevation that divides two watersheds.
Beauty.
So we paddle through Lake Atticamagen, we camp on it for one day.
Good first day. We made about 7 kilometers and we're setting up camp on this luxurious gravel bar.
Then we immediately start having to cross a height of land between the Quebec-Labrador border again. That would take us out of Labrador and back into Quebec. And it was challenging. Fortunately, there were some old winter road blazes there, and we were able to drag our canoes across what was relatively soft ground.
Just coming out of Lake Atticamagen, crossing the height of land from Labrador into Quebec, one of many crossings we're going to be doing. But we're headed into Mole Lake right now and into the DePaw system. But right now we're just dragging up a really shallow creek, and it's kind of a pain, but I think it beats portaging. So as soon as I got up there, dragged the canoe up this, Will had a big pike on the line. Anyways, we already got one to keep for food. And we're seeing all kinds of little brook trout in this creek. So we're hoping we're gonna get into some serious brook trout country, but fishing just seems to be getting better and better.
Here we are in this little creek, and I left my water shoes in my bag, so I'm paying for it with every jagged rock I step on as I'm going up. Don't really have time to make it up, so you can see my feet walking through the rocks.
It's funny, you'd rather put yourself through pain than get the water shoes out of your bag, eh? Here it is, Mole Lake. One portage after this. We'll be back in Quebec in the George River system on the DePaw. Then we're going to be crossing back into Labrador, which flows into the North Atlantic.
So we just took 4 ropes and just 4-man dragged them, very challenging in our heavily laden boats.
We're finding it really hard to drag the canoes just by grabbing these little ropes, so we decided it's time to break out our painter and stern lines. So now we're all pulling with ropes. It's a lot easier now.
Basically, we're on day 3. We're about a day and a half behind because we spent about 2 hours on a 100-meter portage. We've got the height of land to cross into Labrador today, and then we have to go over ridiculous portage through river systems to get back into the North Atlantic. So basically, I'm feeling like on the speed that we're going, we have to go 3 times as fast as we are, or we're gonna need an air vac. We're fucked!
Drag complete.
Just finished the portage, about to put into Fox Lake. Ted and Will are after some brook trout in the creek.
The rule has been always keep a line in the water, and it's been working out because we've been making time while trolling and we've been hooking onto a lot of pike. But we got a meal for tonight, a little fish crisp. It's delicious, and these lakes are cleaner here, so the pike tastes really good here.
Now we're heading into Lake Sinclair, 2 portages to the height of land. Then we got miles of just current and some lakes, and we're gonna push into the DePaw before the end of the day if things go well. Going downriver again in the George River system, but it's getting dark. Muskeg bog around here everywhere. We're gonna camp out just down this river, but finally we're in the DePaw system.
I'm trying to play a canjo, but as you can see, the neck got a little bit of bent. And the string's about 8 inches off the fretboard. Trying to play it, it's like trying to play a cheese grater with your tongue. So I decided We gotta take the net and the strings, put it all on a little campfire for a little more fuel. Because in the next few days we can't have miscellaneous stuff like crazy crappy canjos around when we're doing the portages. We really gotta consolidate here. So that's just a ceremonial entrance into the portage mindset.
So after that, we got into the headwaters of the DePaul River, and we had 100 kilometers of headwaters to travel through on the DePaul. Right in this section of the trip, I caught a 4-pound brook trout, by far my personal best.
This is just a beauty. This is why we're here. Best brook trout fishing in the world. We got a 4-pounder. We weighed it out. Apparently they get up to about 10 once we get back into Labrador. So I'm stoked to just keep slamming fish like this. What a beauty.
Ted caught a 10-pound pike.
So it appears Ted has hooked into a massive pike. We're just gonna go over there and check it out.
Usually at this time of year, the pike that are, the ones that bite that are closer to the shallows are usually the smaller ones. So we're catching a ton of pike. Very swampy, low-lying country. A lot of black spruce trees. Tough to find a good place to camp.
Lac Laporte, tough day of paddling. Not the end of the world. We're starting to get some more water, less dragging as the watershed becomes larger. A lot of tributaries feeding it. Just saw our first 2 caribou. It was a cow and a calf. Got up within about 50 feet of them.
That way. Go right over the rock. Pull, Will, pull.
Nice. Nicely done. Just right beside the DePaul River, by a rapid that normally we would have run, but we had so much gear and we didn't have our spray decks out, so we decided to line it quickly. Finally, we are in the river country. It's been just lakes with drags in between. Looks like we got some water. Looks like we're actually gonna have some current and start making time before our big portage. Gonna try to make it about another 10 miles today before making camp.
Day 6, finally reached the DePaul River. Just ran some rapids. There's caribou just over that hill. Trying to make some time and find a camp before the sun goes down.
As we were making it down the DePaul, we saw a few different caribou. This is from the George River herd. Very, very cool.
Just stopped at a little tributary to do some fishing here. And Will seems to be killing us in fishing. He just landed 2 brook trout and a lake trout. And the second brook trout looks like a pretty decent size. Of course, not close to as big as the one I caught.
Camped at the side of the river one night while we were getting firewood. My brother Ted sustained a nasty injury. We actually thought that maybe it was potentially a trip ender.
7 in the morning, day 8. Ted was using the axe to chop up some wood. Then he went and grabbed one of the chopped up pieces, but it was getting dark and there was a long pointy branch sticking off of it, and somehow it accidentally jabbed him right in the eyeball. So everything was going good, and then bam, all of a sudden his eye is bloodshot. This morning it looks worse.
We were really worried that we'd have to, get him air evacuation, and this would be the end of the trip for all of us, or potentially 2 of us.
It looks pretty bad though, dude, maybe not. Fuck, dude, that must hurt a lot. If it gets really bad, we can just fly you out of here for medical attention. But the good thing is you can still see out of it, right?
Yeah, just as long as it's not like bleeding and internally, and fucking it's gonna stop soon. You know?
So that was a very, very scary situation. He wore a patch, but the depth perception needed to portage and navigate rapids in a canoe, you know, is almost impossible with an eye patch. So he very quickly had to rip that off, and we just, no pun intended, kept our eye on it, made sure it didn't get infected, but Ted managed to tough it out.
We're almost at the portage. We have our first real rapid of the trip, probably about a class 2+. Ted's taken the eye patch off, and I'm kind of worried about him, to be honest with you. He says that his vision is blurry. I don't feel really good about it, but what are you supposed to do other than calling in an air evac? The
DePaul River meets the George River, but we needed to travel up the George to go back all the way to find another height of land to cross back into Quebec. And so finally, traveling down the low DePaul, we got to a creek mouth that marked the beginning of our portage over the height of land between the DePaul and George. It all summed up to be the most challenging portage of my life.
We are now officially at the head of a 6-mile portage. My estimation, 9 hours, 2 trips, probably more like 3. Will, how are you feeling about this portage?
I think it's going to take a really long time, and it's going to be back-breaking, but it's got to be done, you know? Can't move any further forward without doing it, so just get her done and really give her.
Basically, I don't want to quit 100 times, but we're just going to move past through that. Get on our way one step at a time here.
How's it feel?
It stings a lot, pretty sore, swollen, hurts when I move it around.
And it starts off with a 6-mile bushwhack portage, and I believe we actually gained 300 meters in elevation. We're doing the portage in 2 trips. There's no trail, and literally there's places where there's boulders with moss over top. Your leg would break through that moss, and we call them leg crackers. Your whole leg would go into some cavern. It was very slow going. We had to take breaks and a lot, and this took us the entire day.
Seems like,
because I'm just trying to follow that
I think
shore.
some of those like moose bogs we went through were these creeks, maybe.
And of course the black flies were horrific.
You can see all these ones in front of it, eh?
Yeah. Here we are in a bog. Our feet are sinking down in. My groin is chafing. My butt is chafing. My heels have blisters. I'm riddled with bug bites. Well, boys, we're only halfway there. Let's keep going before the sun goes down. 18 more million miles!
Okay, Ted, what's our location?
Okay, 65 degrees, 0 minutes, 82 seconds.
Boys, we're there. We're just on this map here. We're on the new map. That's it right there. That's a put-in. We just got to walk down there, and boom, we're there.
We had to make sure we had the things on us that we needed to camp. And the next day we walked all the way back 6 miles to where our canoes and a few remaining pieces of gear were.
Right now, we're going to walk back to where we started, get our canoes and our miscellaneous stuff, and make it back here and try to push to get as far as we can today. But we're pretty sore already, and we got a lot of carrying to do. Thermocell. Don't leave home without it.
On the way, we took the high road. We got some beautiful views down to the creek, to the surrounding area. And at this point, the topography and the scenery was starting to get a lot more mountainous, and it would get seriously mountainous in the days to come.
Now we have a view of this stretch of river that we're portaging up. It's more of a creek. But right here we can see that we're cutting off a bow in the creek, and it also, there's about a kilometer stretch, or about a half mile or so stretch that we could actually paddle within our canoe. So we might portage here, paddle up there, and continue portaging to make our lives a little bit easier.
Just scouting out this creek on the way back to grab our stuff, second load for the portage, and it's looking from this viewpoint we can probably track.
Okay, we're just walking along here following a caribou trail on our way back to get the canoes, and we came across this cave here that looks like it's maybe a wolf den, a bear den, or something like that.
Marty's gonna be the daring one to go climb in.
How far does it go back, Marty? Can you see?
Goes 10 feet back or further.
Yeah.
Anything interesting in there?
I'm not going in.
So we're walking over the mountain peaks, still buggy as anything, but not quite as bad as before. Trying to get a look at this creek that we're following to the height of land between the DePaul and the George River. And it looks like we can actually portage a couple sections and paddle a couple sections, which is kind of a relief. But also we're getting some great views from up here.
So we made it back to our canoes. There was a fishing rod there. I took a couple casts, bam, slammed 2 beauty specks or brook trout.
2 casts. 2 absolutely beautiful brook trout. Look at those fish.
Cleaned those up right there, put them in a pack, and we started the trip back. And so now we're carrying remaining packs. Me and Ted were carrying packs and canoes each, and we started bushwhacking, and it was so challenging to bushwhack like this with the canoes. And so Ted basically gave up on that and decided that why don't we just drag our canoes, with a light pack in it, and the other guys could follow the creek or jump from rock to rock holding their packs on their back. And I at first didn't think this was a great idea, but as we got into it, I realized this was definitely easier. Not the easiest on our boats, but there was enough water in this stream that we didn't have to damage or drag over heavy jagged rocks, and our boats were pretty light. And so this took us almost 7 hours of going up and up, almost 300 meters in elevation, over 6 miles. So we made it back to our campsite, camped there again. So that's the second full day of portaging.
Tracked and dragged our boats all the way back up to our camp. It was absolutely never ending. Then when we got here, we portaged into the next pool on top of this spot here, which is about another mile. So we got to camp, we were sore, we were hurt, but we had 3 nice beautiful brook trout, a little rice-a-roni, and it really hit the spot last night. Slept in today till about 7:15. We're just wiped, feeling a little sore, and we still have a huge string of portages to do today to get to the height of land so we can start going down river. Then unfortunately we got to go back upriver towards another height of land, so our work is far from over.
All this was just on compass bearings. There was no trails. We'd get to where the best place to start portaging looked like. We'd all set our compass bearings, and we'd all go taking the declination in mind and all that. And for the longer ones, we'd even calculate how much the magnetic pole had moved just to be safe.
Finally made it to the very top of this creek. Now we're going to head due south into another lake, portage in there. 4 more portages and some lake paddling to the height of land. It's not looking like we're going to make it there today, which really sucks.
And then we kept going up in elevation through these lakes until finally we reached a portage that was just horrific. And it was an absolutely mud-strewn portage, and that was the height of land, where the water just sits there. It doesn't really know which way it wants to go, and it just sits there. So we had to literally wade through waist deep mud, falling in.
Oh, that was just one of many times I was crawling on my hands and knees, knee deep, elbow deep, in total swamp mud. Just good kilometer through a swamp. We just portaged, got over the height of land, got to this lake. But, I think we're getting tougher as a group. We've edited down 3 portages to 2. Everybody's carrying way more. We've eaten some of our food, so we have a bit less weight. But, when the going gets tough, the tough gets going.
Once we got over that, we were over the height of land, and we all cheered. And even though it was raining and miserable and the trip was incredibly hard, our morale was super high.
All right, boys, after that horrid portage, how do you feel about paddling into this miserable headwind?
Yeah! Morale is high!
It was incredible, actually, in this area, the extent of the caribou trails. Unfortunately, the George River herd has gone from almost 1 million animals to now almost nothing, but there was these incredibly well-worn trails that looked like a trail from a well-used canoeing area in Algonquin Park, because so many caribou migrate through there. So it was just amazing to see that.
Just making our way down river, thankfully not upriver, towards the George. Not too bad, pretty tough going at times. Right now we're about to do a lining, but we should make it to the George today to start tracking up. Things are going pretty well. Still have pretty low water though.
We continued through lakes. We got to an unnamed river where we lined some rapids. We ran this unnamed river.
There's a lot of signs of bear around here, and we got to make sure that we're very careful. It's an old burn, as you can see behind me. Fire came through here. There's a lot of berries everywhere, blueberries, which we've been snacking on, which is nice, but also these old trees that have been pushed over, split open for the grubs. You know, so we're sticking close together, and we've seen a lot of bears scatter around with a lot of berries.
I camped out along the way, hit some, some terrible weather, and we actually around this time figured out a great way to get water, which was, rained every night. So we'd set up a tarp, and then it would rain on the tarp, and it would collect water, and then we just scoop that rainwater because it's distilled. You don't need to treat it.
And so what we did this time was we set up our tarp so it would catch all the rainwater, and that's a time saver in the morning because you can just scoop your water bottles full of good distilled rainwater, which obviously doesn't carry giardia.
But yeah, every night we had to make camp, chop wood, cook food because it was crazy. But on day 5, both of our stoves broke. So I brought one that was like kind of not working the best anymore, and just in case I brought a backup one, and it was new and it was defective.
We just realized both of our stoves are broken. I had one old Coleman, about 7 years old, was working, it quit. I knew that was gonna happen, so I went out and bought this brand new Optimus. It says tested right on it, seemed to be working, and all of a sudden it just quit. So 2 stoves broken, which is gonna take us a lot longer now that we have to cook everything over a fire.
And then our saw broke as well. The blade on our saw broke, and there's nothing we could do. We had a folding saw, nothing we could do to fix that. So now we had to chop all of our wood with an axe, and we needed to every night. So that's, a lot of work. Sure gave us good practice for, knowing how to get a fire going in wet conditions. We were always able to do that.
Now, one of the things that is good to do is always keep your eye out for little things along the trail. We've been eating blueberries along the way, but if you find little dry pieces and you're in a pinch, you can just get a little spark in there and get it smoldering. It's great fire starter.
Finally, we made it to the George River.
We are going upstream now. We hope now that the low water levels we've been experiencing will officially work in our favor as opposed to against us, which they have been doing so far.
And, we started trying to paddle up the George, and you just see this big, powerful river pushing down in front of you like that, and you realize very quickly that you are not going to be able to paddle this river. I was in a canoe with Marty, and the other canoe was Ted and Will. So me and Marty pulled over, and we cut poles
so we could pole up close to shore, pushing off the bottom. I think it's going to be a lot easier than tracking and paddling, so just gonna go cut a spruce pole right now, and hopefully that makes life a little easier. All right, here we go. A couple of poles, gonna make life a lot easier.
We're gonna try to pole up it, but we really didn't have the time to whittle those poles down into thinner poles. They're so long, so wide at one end, they're floating too much. They weren't long enough, and they're just clunky, and we pretty much gave up on that pretty quickly.
So the poling didn't work out too well. We got into a spot though where we can walk on the bank, so we're starting to track. Seems to be a lot faster.
We're camped at the George at the mouth of a tributary river, a small tributary river. We paddled up that canyon of this tributary river to a beautiful waterfall.
Get it in! Yeah! Oh my goodness, look at those.
Wow! Oh my God, the fishing was crazy. We were catching brook trout, we were catching lake trout, and we were catching Wannanish. And Wannanish are a landlocked salmon. Oh my God, these fish were just so beautiful, and different variations of lake trout, different variations of trout. And to catch Wannanish, none of us had caught that before. Our friend Will, who was, a speckled trout angler from Southern Ontario, was his, what he grew up catching. And to be able to catch fish of this quantity and this size, I mean, he didn't believe fishing existed anywhere in the world this good. And so we had a really good feed that night.
This is for you, Dad.
Oh!
Next morning, it was a nice day. Ted figured out a strategy for getting better traction on the slippery rocks while tracking upriver, and he put big socks on the outside of his river shoes.
I got my neoprene socks, I got my water shoes, and I got wool socks for the outside of the shoes. That should help me not slip on the boulders. It's amazing the additional traction these socks on the outside are gonna give me. Looks silly, but it's not a fashion show out here. Might ruin my socks, but it might save me from breaking an ankle or a finger or something, crashing down some slippery rocks.
So near the front of the canoe by the carrying handle, we tied a bridle so that we could then track the canoe by a rope that attached the keel line. The day before we were trying this, but our bridle was too far back. That's good for lining downriver. It was creating too much drag on the canoe. And so yeah, we managed to tie this bow bridle, and then we managed to track our canoes upriver by just holding the canoe on an angle and allowing the current mix with the side wash on the canoe. As long as it's in the right angle, that current would pull it away from shore, and it would keep it on a bit of an angle like this as we walked up shore, and we were able to tighten and loosen our ropes and steer the canoe around rocks and just walk up shore. So we got that pretty dialed in, and it worked really, really well. So that was an awesome way to track upriver.
So the socks on the bottom of the water shoes ended up tearing as predicted, but it worked pretty good for the first 4 miles, and I did use them earlier in the trip to track upriver for about 8 hours, so they lasted me pretty good here, and I think I'm on to something with the traction.
And then we were able to, instead of portaging up the rapids, we were actually able to just hold the gunnels of our canoe and actually physically wade them up the rapids, which was kind of sketchy. We'd reach areas where there's kind of big back eddies, and we'd be able to paddle up a big back eddy and then ferry across the current to another big back eddy, then get out and wade, then go back to tracking. And we used all these strategies to get up the George, and finally we made it up the bulk of the main George River.
We made it up the George! Yeah! Wasn't that hard. Nothing, really. When I paddled down and do it again, just to hit all those nice rapids, we had to line and track up.
Got a couple geese. We're gonna pluck them, get them ready for the pot. We're probably actually gonna spit roast them, maybe make one into jerky.
Yeah, we got really fortunate when we saw them on shore. We kind of crept up and got within range and waited for them to pop out of the water up in the air. And first shot, we downed 2 of them, which is more than enough. So we'll be good eating tonight.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good idea. Gonna roast up a goose on a spit. 2 Y sticks, a spit. Spit's gonna have a couple forks on either end to hold the bird so it doesn't slip on the spit. We're gonna attach them with snare wire. It's gonna be real good.
Got a nice fire going. We're gonna roast up some geese and fill our bellies before we go to bed and give her real hard tomorrow.
Ted, you chopped a lot of wood, dude.
Now, are you gonna smoke the bird with pipe tobacco?
Well, first I think we're gonna do like a group view caking.
Okay.
And then we'll probably
I believe it's pronounced bukkake.
You guys eat your share of this fish? How's that goose look?
Looking good. shot.
But of course, we still had a very long ways to go to get to the height of land. So now we're going through all the headwaters of the George, and in between those headwaters is connecting streams, and a lot of them were rushing and deep. And so there's a lot of short portages, a lot of other areas where we'd have to wade to get between all those headwaters of the George. And so that was very challenging. We got into some nice fish in there as well, through an area that it's hard to tell whether it was a lake or whether it was a river. It was like a shallow, wide lake, but it had current through spots. Very, very cool. Will caught a 9-pound lake trout.
Will has just hooked on to a huge fish. We don't know what it is. Yeah! Oh my God, it's a behemoth. Yeah.
Ted went on, caught another 9-pound lake trout. I caught maybe a decent 3-pound, 4-pounder.
Just hooked into a nice laker here. Just spinning around with my line. Doesn't know what it wants to do. There it is. It's my first lake trout of the trip.
It's really tough going here, going upriver again, and we're falling behind schedule every day. We're supposed to be making 30 kilometers or I don't know, like 20 miles a day, and we're just not hitting that mark. Ever since we got up the George River, we've been on a slow pace. I don't know why, we just figured the hardest was behind us, but you know, it's proven that it isn't, and the map show it wasn't, so we really got to snap back into that gear we were in before.
It's really, really cold out today. We all need our jackets and snuggly toques. We have in fact received word that there is a hurricane on the way. Right now the epicenter is over Maine, and it stretches all the way to Manic 5 Lake in Quebec, hundreds of miles. It's supposed to hit us in 14 hours. Luckily we have our super strong mountaineering tents. We might not be able to paddle tomorrow, and we're all a little nervous because it's going to be quite a beating from this raging hurricane that's about to hit us here. Biggest one in over 50 years. The crew is looking distraught.
And then finally we got to a couple massive lakes, Chapiteau and Lac au Golon. This was a massive wilderness lake. Absolutely no development on the lake whatsoever. And even before we hit this 8-kilometer long open crossing, we had to do what was maybe a 4-kilometer wide open water crossing. And there is some argument between Ted and Marty. Marty didn't want to do it because I'd actually terrified Marty on an open water crossing on a previous trip. Ted wanted to do it. Finally, we decided to just go for it, and we managed to stop at like, you know, a glacial deposit of like rocks with one little tree growing out of it in the middle of this like huge bay on this huge lake, and stop and bail. But yeah, it was pretty scary. We paddled hard, some waves were crashing over the gunnels, and then we made the final push. We got to shore, and then the weather it was dark, it was late, started dumping rain. We learned later that we were actually catching the tail end of Hurricane Irene while we were out there, and it was miserable. And the next day we were windbound. Golon was throwing up some huge breakers, and the wind was gusting, and there's no way we could travel safely. So what we did is we built a catamaran.
Windbound, Lac Gourlandaise, threatening to seriously halt our timing to get to the Labrador border. Huge rollers, massive lake. We're trapped here on a little somewhat protected bay. We're looking out onto the big lake. Huge breakers, probably 6-7 feet or more. We gotta push on. We got a big crossing coming, so what do? We build a catamaran.
We lashed poles across the gunnels of our canoe, tied them up underneath, made a sturdy catamaran. That took us so long, but by the time we were finished, the waves had died down quite a bit. It's so hard to tell how big waves are on camera. Trust me, they're big. And in fact, they're so big initially that they were too big even with the catamaran.
The wind seems to have died down a little bit, but it's still gusting. I still see some big rollers out there. White caps don't look as bad. Almost done this catamaran rig. we're gonna get out of here, but basically this morning it was just too windy and too wavy to paddle in anything. So we got the spruce poles across the canoes, great strong catamaran material, got strong ropes tied under the hulls, and we tied our bows and our sterns together really tightly. That adds a lot of extra support. Now we're gonna put on the spray decks because these waves out there are so big that sure, the catamaran won't tip in them, but it will swamp. These canoes will fill up with water, and the weight of this catamaran will never be able to drag it to shore on the major crossing we have. So we're gonna put on these splash guards and make sure that even if a couple big waves hit us, that we'll still be okay. But of course, after the time it takes to rig this thing up, the waves and wind have died down substantially. I still see some big white caps out on the lake, so it's probably good we took the time to do it.
Catamaran and a catamaran, bro! Catamaran, catamaran. Give 'em a run in a catamaran. There'll be big waves, there'll be winds blowing. We'll be catamaran in a catamaran. Catamaran in a catamaran. No problem if the winds are strong. No problem if the waves are big, 'cause we got a catamaran and a catamaran. Catamaran, got a catamaran.
Roll out the bong, pass out the bong, let the informer call 911. Beautiful lake, also a huge lake. We've been enjoying these awesome tailwinds all day, just blowing us in the right direction. But at one point they got a little too big, which got a little bit scary, so we got close to shore and we're all right. But it's definitely speeding things up. We're hoping we can make it to these old cabins we heard that are about 10 miles away from us, maybe 15 miles away from us. They're used, I believe, when surveyors were surveying the border between Quebec and Labrador. We're hoping they're going to be a good place to hold up if this hurricane hits us, which we're pretty worried about. Pretty gross. Pretty gross. Oh, Marty's going for 2. Ballsy.
How does it taste?
Like my grandmother's fingernails.
Last night we felt the taste of that hurricane, howling winds. Took us 2 hours to paddle 4 miles. Freezing cold, we were all shivering. We had to make a fire under a tarp, rig it up in the driving rain to get some food in us. Very miserable, misery factor very high, morale very low. Kept raining hard all morning. Didn't get up till late, but made it onto the river. Very late start, which is kind of concerning since we have so much time to go, so much distance to move. But it's just getting more and more beautiful. The surrounding area is unbelievable as we're heading into the Adlatok country. Eskers, rugged landscape, not very many trees, mountainous, and definitely stark, but beautiful.
Marty is reorganizing the food barrels here so that we can edit it down from 4 to 3. Also do a food inventory to see what we have. Make sure we have enough, whether or not we have too much, all of that type of stuff, anything that's going bad. Jim's making pancakes like a good girl. Will?
Nothing as usual.
Nothing as usual. Sipping his Joe. Just finished his morning. Nothingness.
Since we are still in a situation where we have 2 completely broken stoves, it's been kind of a time suck because we've had to cook everything over the fire. Of course, we don't have an adequate grill. But you know what? It's working pretty well. On nights where it's really rainy, we just have a small cooking fire underneath the tarp. And we just whip the frying pan directly on the fire like so. Flapjacks, anyone? Yesterday we just whipped here with that tailwind. We were expecting a hurricane to hit last night. It was nothing. Good morning this morning, whipped up some pancakes. But now we're sort of wondering if we're going to get the hurricane or not. We're probably going to get a taste of it. but doesn't matter because we got to make some serious time. We got to put some miles behind us. We're going to be in the Adlatok today. Finally, the country should be getting good, and we should start experiencing even better fishing than what we already had, the best in the entire world.
Well, we managed to complete this huge 8-kilometer open water crossing, and then we're back into more upriver travel.
Funny, every time we break out the camera, it's like, boom, we catch like 7 fish. Oh yeah. Little laker.
We got so high in elevation that we were at our next height of land, and this was day 21. So on the other side of that height of land, where it was the extreme source of the beautiful Adlatok River, and that's really what we had come for. So at this point we were so high in elevation and so far north that there was no trees. So we portaged over this height of land, and there's an old Cold War base there. Americans stationed themselves there to be able to detect Soviet nuclear missiles coming over the pole. And so we heard that there's some cabins there. When we got there, we actually, because there was an old airstrip, we actually found some people there that were building a few cabins, and they'd been commissioned by the Naskapi Innu to build a healing lodge, because this is their traditional territory. There was already some buildings there, old buildings, and there was an airstrip. So we found some new buildings there that was really cool.
We read in a trip report that the last group wrote 29 years ago that there were some cabins here near an airfield. I believe they put them here when they were making the border between Quebec and Labrador. Anyways, I thought I heard a noise, a quad or something, and Marty said he figured there must be people around, or the black flies were really fierce around the next corner. Turned out it was a quad, and all of a sudden there's about 5 guys. We got out of the canoes and about 5 guys were surrounding us. Well, it turns out that in the same spot that this cabin were supposed to be, that the Innu, which is a native tribe, had hired some people to build a spiritual healing lodge out in the middle of the absolute wilderness, you know, hundreds and hundreds of miles from the nearest community. Here we are, and all of a sudden they put us up for the night. They plugged in a generator for us. They made us coffee. They gave us food. Just the most unexpected thing possible.
And stayed a night in a cabin. We got all our stuff dried out because everything was soaking. We were expecting there to be a cabin there, but not a cabin that was this nice.
My wool pants have been wet since day 6. Now they're dry. There's Will cooking up some bacon. Fine young broth of a lad. And sausages they give too. Ton of sausages. So here we are staying in this beautiful cabin in the headwaters of the Adlatok, and we're eating bacon and eggs. Pretty freaking epic and quite morale boosting. So we're feeling pretty good about that.
So we left this old landing strip, which was a rebuilt kind of Cold War base, as a spiritual healing lodge. The reason that the Naskapi Innu of what's now a coastal community called Nantuwashish, which was called Davis Inlet, is where the last nomadic peoples of Canada that lived in this whole area were actually relocated to the coast, and the one First Nation community on the coast between the other communities that are Inuit communities. That definitely wasn't good for them. The community had, you know, all kinds of problems and what have you. And so this is a spiritual healing lodge that they put the spiritual healing lodge in this area, which is an old Cold War base, just because there's a landing strip there, but more importantly because this area is their traditional territory. These were migratory people, still are to a large extent, and would spend time traveling between fish camps on the salmon run, which would be closer in the summer, and traveling way up into the interior hunting caribou at other times of year. And so they've invested probably from getting some of the money from the Voisey Bay mining property and reestablishing more presence in this area. For the most part, it has not been a success story, going from that nomadic life to a sedentary life where they could, you know, get support from the Ferry and from the Canadian government. Has, you know, all over, for the majority of people, from my understanding, has not been a good thing. So it's great that they're going to establish kind of roots in this traditional territory and hopefully care for the land there too. So anyways, it was pretty interesting to sort of learn more about that culture. Also learn about this old Cold War base and actually see some people in there. Anyways, so we moved on from there. We stayed there for a night, dried out some stuff, moved on from these cabins and out onto this lake in the Adlatok system. And Ted catches this fish. We don't even know what it was. It turns out in the end that it was a landlocked char, but not with its spawning colors yet.
So yeah, we just caught this trolling. We're not exactly sure what it is. It could be a landlocked salmon, or as they call them, wanna-ish here. Or it could be possibly maybe a little a char, but we're not sure. But I think it's one of those two.
Later when we ate it, it had absolutely incredibly ruby red meat, incredibly delicious fish. We found a traditional campsite where there was this huge caribou rack.
That's probably the biggest rack I've ever seen.
So just in Labrador, hooked into a wanna-ish, which is a landlocked salmon. Then we came across this massive caribou rack, skull attached. We're thinking maybe we should take it with us. However, it's going to be a lot to carry on the portage, so we may not. And we also found this smoking rack. Obviously, some Innu natives came up here from somewhere to caribou hunt from somewhere else in the Labrador and smoked all the meat to preserve it and left the rack here because it's just too huge to carry out. Looks like the wolves came around to
Another rack right there.
see what they could get. Looks like this was a camp here. A bunch of spruce boughs, so they would have had a canvas tent probably. And these are the poles from their tent right here.
I just learned something from looking at that smoker setup, and then I've used that same setup a bunch of times closer to home too, and on trips as well. Then we get to this huge waterfall on the outlet of this lake. And it's a steep portage, beautiful thundering waterfall pouring into a canyon. As soon as we get down that 100 feet, now there's trees again, but we were way up on the height of land. That elevation, just that extra 100 feet meant no trees. And now I thought that we'd hit some good fishing holes before on this trip. Now we hit an epic fishing hole. I catch a 5-pound brook trout here.
It's huge, buddy. It's like fucking 10 pounds.
It's huge, dude. It's huge.
Huge!
Yeah! Unbelievable!
Dude, that is like a 5-pounder. Weigh it immediately. Holy shit.
There we go, boys. Labrador brook trout fishing. Best in the world. That's what we came all the way here for, right there.
Boys, I got a big one here, boys.
luxurious stay in a cabin last night. Now we're back on the Adlatok, just portaged around this massive unnamed waterfall that's just right here in the wilderness. And already we just started slamming fish. I just caught a 5-pound brookie right here. It was just every cast the bite was on. It's just unreal. The flies are coming out pretty bad, to be honest with you. I can't wait till this is over because I gotta get this bug net on immediately because I got about 1,000 bites on my face right now. But you know what? That's just part of the price you pay when you're out here experiencing this and experiencing the kind of fishing we're experiencing right now. It's unbelievable.
We're watching otters swim along and eat fish, and you know, usually when there's a good population of otters there's not as many fish. Well, let me tell you something, they were feeding the otters and they're still thriving. And part of the reason that the trout fishing is so good in Labrador has to do with the amount of black flies. So Labrador will feed off black fly larvae, and black flies lay their eggs in shallow moving water. So there's a lot of rivers, a lot of shallow moving water. But the brook trout, once the water warms, they have to leave the shallow waters once it warms. For one, they don't have as much oxygen when the water's warm. But because the rivers in Labrador stay cold all year and the black flies stay bad well into September, the brook trout can stay feeding in these rapids all year long. So they get tons of food, they get huge. You could kind of compare it to black bears or grizzly bears that live on salmon rivers. So we continue on down the river, and now we're just in the beauty of this incredible Adlatok River.
Look at this amazing waterfall! Wow!
There's just steep canyons. You can hear water driplets dripping off, echoing through the canyon. Catch a couple nice fish. But things are about to change because we're heading for what is arguably even more challenging of a portage than the first one we did between the height of land on the DuPont George. And this is a pretty scary one too. Leading up to the portal of this canyon is a class 1-2 rapid, and you actually have to eddy out before you're swept into this canyon, which is a bone-crushing, raging rapid for 8 kilometers long. This canyon drops almost the height of the CN Tower over 8 kilometers. So it's impossible to run this thing, and to portage around it is, you know, turns out to be a portage that was almost 2.5 days long.
We've just come to a class 1 rapid at the head of the massive canyon. We're gonna start the portage today, camp on the canyon walls. Looks like it's gonna be spectacular. But before the canyon, this rapid is flowing and there's a small place to get over to the side before you're forced into the canyon. So right now, it's eddy out or die.
Marty's in my boat as usual. He stops being so nervous because it turns out not to be as challenging as we thought. And then Marty spots 3 bears, a mother and 2 cubs, up on top of the canyon wall, because it's like fairly sloped, and then right where the canyon starts, it's just like this portal with these 2 big steep hills, and then it just turns into jagged cliffs. And Marty, hey, 2 bears, a mom and 2 cubs, mid-rapid, he spots this.
Coming down the rapid, we were worried about our eddy and making it, but it looked pretty easy. So I started looking around, and just where we have to get out in portage, there's a mother bear with 2 tiny cubs.
And so he spots these bears and go, oh yeah, so I'm looking at these bears now. Ted and Will are ahead of us. So we catch up to Ted and Will. We're like, guys, there's bears, and these bears are literally right where we're about to start portaging to.
There's the massive canyon we're portaging, about 4 miles, maybe more. We have to go over this hill, and that's where the sow and 2 cubs are.
The angle is such that we couldn't see the bears from there. And they go, really, really? I'm like, yeah, get at least one gun. We'll get a gun. So we take a 30-06 and we walk back to lessen the angle off till we can see them. Sure enough, mom and 2 cubs right there, right on to where we need to be portaging to.
Marty just took a look at the mother bear and 2 cubs, which are on top of the hill in front of me right now on our portage route around this canyon. It says right now they're actually coming towards us down the river. He just walked up river to where he got a better view. So we're gonna wanna have this out. She's looking at us.
The sow bear sees us. Instead of going the other way, she decides to start coming directly for us. So she starts navigating down this steep hill. She sends her 2 cubs up a tree and keeps coming for us. Now we did have a goose in our food barrel for a couple of days, and maybe some blood leaked out and was on stuff, and there was all our remaining food in there. We had a couple of fish in the food barrel that we just caught at the waterfall, so it probably smelled particularly yummy. Also, maybe she just wanted to eat us too, or just see us. Maybe she'd never seen people before, who knows. But she kept coming closer and closer and closer, so I decided to fire a warning shot. Hits some rock scree and dust flies up, and the bear turns around and starts kind of moseying away slowly. Not fast enough from a gunshot. We expect this thing to be running in terror. So what do? Protocol, black bear protocol. You yell at it, you make noise, you make yourself look big and all that kind of stuff. So we yell at, hey, beat it. I'm yelling out. Marty goes, I don't know what the hell he said.
Hey! Beat it!
Get out of here! Get!
The bear turns around, all the hair stands up on his back, and at 180s and starts running at us down the hill, literally charging us. Now it's a far way away, but this is still concerning. And with that, you'll see the video footage start shaking like this because Will's filming, and all of a sudden you just see his feet and he's shaking because Marty, Ted, and Will just start speed walking the other way. And I'm like, guys, don't run, stay close together. I get up on a rock.
Guys, don't run away. Stand up on a rock.
Well, with that, the bear plows into these alder bushes, and by the time it makes it through these dense alder bushes, it's not running anymore because at this point it's probably angry at the alder bushes than it is at Marty. And it gets out and it stands up like this and it's looking at us. Well, Ted has a bear banger out.
No, do not.
Don't, man.
Yeah, that's the mother.
Should I fire this?
Yeah. Good work, buddy, good work.
Bear banger is an explosive made for scaring bears, and the bear's about 50 yards away from us. And so this bear banger goes out, goes boom, and blows up right on top of the bear's head. And with that, the bear is scared and falls back down on its butt, and it leaves. It doesn't take off full speed, but it leaves, gets its cubs down, decides that we're not something it wants to mess with, and it goes away. So we were like, that was pretty cool, but scary. So at that point, we're like, okay, let's leave the bears a little. At this side of the river, there's a cliff. Down the river, there's a raging death rapid in a canyon. In front of us is an irate mother bear. And over this way is endless miles of wilderness that's, we don't want to go that way. In fact, let's just camp here and let the bear do its thing for a day and let the dust settle. So that's what we did, which meant we lost some time that day, unfortunately.
So now it's, do we portage left? Probably not a good idea. There's a chain of lakes we could follow that run northeast, follow them, then portage back to the canyon, which would more or less put us in the direction we want to go, or it's go to the right shore and portage there, which would mean instead of eddy out or die, it's now front ferry or die, because there's absolutely no eddy on the other side and a steep bank right before the portal of the canyon. Also, the right side is a lot more challenging of a portage, so not really great. So what we're thinking is that we might have to hang out here for a bit, start our portage. It's going to be dark in about an hour and a half though, or just camp here tonight and hopefully stay bear free.
So we're scouting this portage. We decided to come up here, bring the guns just in case. Probably gonna have to start doing it tomorrow, but we can see all the bear sign around here, the scat, the footprints. Right here is just where they knocked apart some rocks, trying to get at some bugs, some insects, some grubs.
And then the next day we decide how we're going to get around this canyon. So instead of just portaging where the bear was, we decide that we're actually going to portage north and follow a chain of lakes that run north of the canyon. And we decide that even though overall that's 2 kilometers further that we're traveling, it sums up to be about 1 kilometer less of distance that we actually have to carry stuff, because paddling is easy. And these are all small lakes, so some of them are only 200-300 meters of paddling. And I wonder, we could have been the first people to ever put a canoe into one of these remote wilderness lakes.
So we've decided to portage through a string of 4 small lakes that run more or less parallel to this canyon. We figure this route will be about a mile shorter in portaging, and it'll also avoid where the mother and 2 cubs seem to be hanging out. There's the portal of the canyon.
So that's what we do, and we're just bushwhacking on compass bearings.
So we're portaging through this chain of lakes here on day 21 to try to bypass the canyon. And it looks like Ted found another route where we could do 2 more portages into a couple other lakes and save 500 meters total distance, but also break up the portage. So instead of portaging 4 miles, it's about, you know, a little over 3.5, a little paddling in between, which should save our backs a little bit. So it looks pretty good. Just using the ruler here on my Leatherman as kind of a guide to count minutes on a 1 to 50 topographic map, so we make sure we mark the right location in the GPS. Your head is totally in the way. You can see it's a lot easier to miss the lake on this side than this side. We'll see it from this high country though. Basically the magnetic pole is moving, so we're gonna have to off of our bearing, we're gonna have to add 30 degrees,
is 12,
then we're gonna have to subtract
12 out of 12.
9 minutes per every year, so we're gonna subtract about 30 minutes.
9 minutes per every year?
Yeah, 9 minutes, not degrees. Like we're changing it by 30 degrees, right?
I know that, I know.
So that's not a big problem.
Traveling between these wilderness lakes, we go all day long. Finally, we get all our stuff to where we're going to camp that night.
Just getting to camp. Portaging through all those lakes proved difficult, but probably easier than going through the canyon. The black flies are absolutely disgusting. Marty's face has been swollen up. He's got to take antihistamines.
The black flies are horrific that day. Marty's whole face swells up.
Ted's digging for antihistamines right now because Marty has a crappy bug net, and he just got absolutely lambasted by black fly bites. Let's have a little look-see at his face. You can see the severe swelling has gotten in there just from hundreds and hundreds, possibly thousands of bites. His neck is just absolutely riddled. You can see that too. Somehow they're just flying into his bug net. We got to stitch it up again, but we're kind of wondering how the hell this is happening because he's clearly getting a lot more bites than us.
We brought a bug shelter. We barely used it because by the time it got dark out and cold, the black flies left.
Today's windy, they're not so bad, but it's amazing. One little hole and hundreds of them get in there and then stay in your net and just riddle you with bites.
Got us here some high protein, high calorie meal replacement, putting it in water bottles for some extra chocolate energy on the Portage trail. Bugs are so bad! Oh, thermocell! Oh, 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 oh! I was skeptical at first when I had bug baits riddled all over my forehead. But then, at camp at night, I turned on the thermocell and I guess it worked. Now I'm not dying of swelling. Thermocell, thanks for saving my life. Excuse me, Thermocell, could you get rid of these bugs? Relief.
Just about to embark on another portage, 2.5 miles, still getting around this canyon via chain of lakes. Not looking forward to it. It's probably going to take 4-5 hours per trip, and we have 2 trips. Here we're just taking this portage on a compass bearing from this lake that's north of the canyon itself, and we're just gonna head off into the bush and hopefully hit a tributary that we can follow down that's not too steep. So I'm hoping this works out, but it is not going to be easy, and there's pretty glum tone amongst the crew here before we head out on this portage.
The next day we continue on. We go all day. We get some beautiful views of this canyon.
Day 22, been doing a long portage, about 3 miles, just on a compass bearing to bypass this massive canyon still. We're losing light. We ran back to get our stuff. We've been doing it in stages. We don't know whether we're gonna have to camp on the ridge tonight or possibly lower our boats and gear down the canyon wall on ropes to the base of it. It's not gonna be very easy, so we better get rolling here. You can see some of the canyon behind me right now. Basically, we're not going to be able to get both our loads to the bottom. It's going to be pretty precarious trying to get there. So we're going to take our camping gear, camp at the bottom of the canyon, and come back up for the canoes tomorrow. It's the best we can do.
So finally we get to the base of the canyon. We can't find a way down. Well, sure enough, guess who helps us out? The bears. We follow the bears' established trail, by far the best way to get down to the base of this canyon. We take 1 load down. It's too late. Our canoes are still back up on the canyon, but we have everything we need there. So we camp out at the base of this canyon, exhausted.
That portage there was a lot bigger and a lot tougher than we thought it was going to be heading into the trip. Turned out to be just never ending, and the ending of it was the hardest, toughest leg of it. Coming down about 600 feet, heavy overgrowth, and we were just about snapping at this point. So, you know, but it's good to be down here, finally.
We wake up first thing in the morning, a cold morning, because at this point we're well into September, and we go all the way back up and we get the rest of our gear and we continue on downriver.
So here we are, 3rd day of bypassing this canyon. We're down in the canyon right now where we made it last night just before dark. It's about 6:45 in the morning, and we're just about to head back up the canyon wall, bring down our canoes and our last couple pieces of gear. It's gonna cram down some breakfast and get rolling. It's basically gonna take us 3.5 days to get past this canyon and miles of portaging, but what a spectacular sight it is.
Lo and behold, the great canyon of the Adlatok River. It gave us a battle, but we conquered it, and it sure is beautiful here on this nice sunny day. Great lighting, no bugs out yet, not too hot, so we're hoping to get it done before those little buggers come out.
Around the bend, it looks like we've got like a kilometers of class 1 rapids, at least from up here.
Here we go again! Woo! That was a sarcastic piece of excitement there, people.
Should we just start going down here?
I think you gotta get more left.
Like
But
more this way?
yeah.
Okay.
I got a rope.
Finally done. Done, baby. Portaging complete.
Boom.
Okay, so here we are. We finally made it down into the canyon, having conquered the Great Canyon of the Adlatok River. It has waterfalls, it has Class 5 rapids, it has 300-foot vertical cliffs, 600-foot peaks. That's why we couldn't run the thing, but hey, we portaged. We paddled a series of lakes, including about 4.5 miles of portaging, back-breaking stuff. We had all our gear, we had our canoes, we threw it on our back, and we got around this canyon, and we're back in the water now, and we're ready to head down river and see what else it brings us. We're ready to get some more fish in our bellies, because we've been fishless for the last couple days.
Canyon behind us, beautiful waterfalls all around us, just pouring down off of cliffs, gorgeous mountains, and some swifts, and luckily not a super challenging day this day, so we make it a decent distance.
Day 22. Saw a couple geese earlier. We're hoping we can get a couple today. Beautiful scenery we're experiencing. Long, fast-moving current. Finally past the canyon. Jagged, rugged country. Just beautiful. Each one of us landed a nice lake trout. Me, Ted, and Marty. We've also got a couple speckles. We're gonna eat those lake trout tonight. They should be delicious, but a little chilly outside, a little windy, but pretty sunny and no bugs, so it's a fair trade for me any day.
We got ourselves some lake trout. Pulling the coals out of the fire. We got a pot of boiling water. And last but not least, rice-a-roni cooking over there. Wanna-nish. What are you eating with? You don't have a fork?
Nope.
What's that?
It's a piece of wood.
Piece of wood that you just found, or did you chop a little piece?
Yeah, Marty was axing some logs for the fire.
Yeah.
This is a chunk that flipped out, which is now my one-time only use and discard fork.
So the next morning, now we are, getting ready for the crazy, insane Whitewater section that is fast approaching.
75, 85, 95, 100.
So wait a minute, we have to go 145.
105, 115, 120 is it. It's more than 15. It's like 17.
812s are what? 96.
We went from 20 a day to 17.
And we have to go
850.
Big day yesterday, boys.
8 times 15 is 120. 5 or something.
Okay. And so say we have to go 17.
Yeah, but the ocean paddle is 23 miles, which means
miles?
like 40K. So we have to do that in one day.
Ocean paddle's 30 kilometers.
23 miles, he said.
Who said that?
Coffin.
Really?
Yeah.
I counted on the map, I thought it was 30. Actually, it's way more than 30 kilometers, you're right.
So that's like 35, 40?
I think.
Yeah, but that's all right. That's guaranteed flat water. Worst case scenario, we catamaran. We can still do that pretty.
Worst case scenario, it's a winter storm!
I think it's going to be freaking gorgeous, dude,
Yeah.
paddling out that fjord in the ocean.
18.125 per day. So 19K a day.
And we did 30. What did we do? Like
31
32 yesterday.
31, 32.
Plus a 1.5. Plus a 1 mile portage down a fucking sheer rock cliff. Rapide for a click.
Kilometer.
Rapide for quarter click. Third of a click. That's 4. Quick little portage. Do some casts in the eddy, or maybe even after the rapid, which is a quarter click. Another quarter click. 1 click. 1 click. Just never ending. Falls again. Oh, this is going to be the most amazing day ever.
Could be linings.
Anyone who uses food barrels on a canoe trip or expedition knows that they're great, but it can be very difficult to find what particular piece of food it is you're looking for when you're digging for your grub. So here's how Ted deals with finding those tough to reach objects.
Does anybody know where the tea is?
Oh, I haven't seen it for weeks, Ted.
Where is it?
Here we are, day 24 on the Adlatok River, and today is a serious whitewater day. We're going to be running all kinds of rapids. A couple things that are important when you're running rapids: have some pulleys on you. Now, these are great because if you dump, you capsize, you come right into a boulder, your canoe smashes, the current pins it on the boulder, maybe even wraps it around. It's impossible to get your boat off. So these pulleys and some ropes will make that a lot easier to rig a system from shore to unpin your boat and get you down the river safe and sound. The other thing we're going to do is inflate airbags in our bow and stern, and what those do is they help your canoe float. So if you fill up with water while you're running a rapid, you'll be that much higher in the water and avoid swamping.
So we, put these airbags in the canoe. We bust out our fly fishing rods, and we go through our maps and everything like that. And another beautiful day of traveling.
Back on the river, paddling through a lake-like section right now, about to hit a section of some serious rapids. We got everything ready to do that, all our gear waterproof, spray decks, airbags, the whole 9. And I'm just sitting here and enjoying this unbelievable country we're passing through of the Adlatok River.
And then we're into the whitewater section where the river just drops like this and things get very challenging once again. Long boulder-strewn rapids. The river is relatively low but still powerful, so there's a lot of rapids and a lot of places we have to dodge boulders.
Just had a great piece of whitewater here on the Adlatok. We went and checked it out, scouted it out. Pretty intense. We're gonna strap on some head cams, get some footage. When you're out here, the dangers of running a rapid are elevated extremely because we're so remote here. You lose a boat, you lose your gear, you get hurt. It can be a serious problem, so we're going to proceed with caution. But this one looks runnable, should be a pretty wild ride, and I'm pretty pumped to just go and nail this run. So things are getting exciting here in Labrador.
Forward, 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 forward! Okay, get left. Okay, get left. Okay. Okay, now get right. Woo! Okay, right.
Still making our way through rapids. We're able to run a bunch, hopefully make camp in about 2 or 3 miles at the base of a falls where we can just load in on fish and fill up our tummies. So it's been a great day of running rapids. Tomorrow will be the same thing all over again. Day 24 at camp at the top of a waterfall. got to camp, starving hungry, tried to hike to the base, couldn't do it before dark, too long of a hike, completely starving. We only have 2 small fish for today. Pretty upsetting, but we got a goose to roast up, so that should be good. Just sort of hit the wall here with hunger because I've been burning so many calories today, and I'm ready to just wolf down some food immediately. Been another long, hard, black fly ridden portage around this falls. Way harder than I thought it was going to be. We should have portaged left, we portaged right. Tons of alder bushes, so hard to get through, pretty much impenetrable at some parts. I had to take 3 trips with my gear in a couple different parts because it was too dangerous to try to carry at once. And I'm not even done yet. I got to go down this near cliff to put in at the pool at the base of this waterfall and then run the rapid you see behind me. So tough going with the portaging once again.
It just took so long. Just blew our day. Enraged, pissed. We'll be lucky to make 6K today.
Getting eaten alive in here. I guess that's the way it goes, so we're pushing on.
Do this short portage, we run a rapid, then we run a crazy class 4. Will run it perfectly, back ferry left, eddy out, me and Marty run it right, eddy out, raging rapid, and then on an easier rapid just below that one we kind of come up onto a rock and we slide off and dump, and I scramble to rescue the boat.
So they just dumped, but luckily, before the canoe went down that rapid, just below and got pinned, Jim managed to get the rope out of the stern, and both Jim and Marty managed to get a hold of it and pull the boat into an eddy to safety.
Marty's wearing a wetsuit. I'm just wearing a dry suit, but my gaskets had broken earlier, so I'm just wearing it as a bottom, and the water was cold. And so I managed to grab the throw bag, and we wrestled this boat to shore, managed to rescue the boat. We don't lose it downriver, thankfully.
We were supposed to hit that short class 3 far left. We couldn't have really hit it further right. Slammed into a boulder, slid off the side, upside down. Luckily, we both held onto our paddles and executed a great rescue. The only problem is my dry suit gaskets are ripped, so I'm just sort of using them as hip waders, and they totally filled with water, and they're still filled with water. So I'm feeling a little bit on the chilly side. Luckily, it's a pretty warm day, at least for Labrador September standards. But I'm pretty sure that this portage we have coming up is going to help me warm up before I catch a chill. How was that portage?
Oh, compared to yesterday, it was easy going. Tough going portages on this trip, so it's nice to have a little bit of wind to keep the bugs away around beautiful falls. Magnificent.
Okay, forward. Woo!
Ted and Will ran this super challenging rapid, and they almost slammed sideways and wrapped their boat around a boulder in a huge rapid. It would have just probably ripped their boat in half. Potentially would have been a trip ender. They managed to just hit it and just slide off and didn't dump. A miracle.
Forward hard! Hard! Super hard! Oh, we're swamping. Should have gone right at that. Okay. Oh my god, dude. We're swamping. Draw. Forward hard. Well, that rapid was a lot of fun. We were looking at it from afar. We thought maybe this is a 2-2 plus. Then we sort of rounded up around the top, and we saw the waves. We realized it was a lot bigger than it looked from shore. Definitely a class 3, but it was a lot of fun. Just hit the wave train down the middle, took in a lot of water, could have back paddled a bit, but hey, it was a fun run and we made it pretty dry.
Just getting to camp here. Only made it about 2 miles today. Pathetic. Portages that took way longer than we thought. Bad fishing, cold snap last night. It's got none of the fish biting. All that we're hitting were like minnows.
Pretty rough day today. Consumed a lot of our time just running rapids, portaging.
That night, it gets down to -6 degrees Celsius. So it's freezing. Everything's frozen solid. Any water or water bottles are freezing. This was bad because at this point we were really relying on fish for food. And all of a sudden, the fish's metabolism changes like that. Nothing's biting. In areas where we're loading in, catching tanks, we're fishing as hard as we can, and all we're catching is the odd small hot dog sized fish. And this is really concerning for us because we're in an area where the work is super demanding. It's very challenging. Plus, we're losing 15 minutes of light every single day. So the days are getting shorter and shorter, and we're pushing till it's almost dark to just make it through this section. One night we had to split a hot dog sized fish between the 4 of us, and I literally had like a tablespoon worth of fish. And you're just getting weak. When you're weak, it's more challenging. You're getting hangry, but we managed to just push through and tough it out with a third of the needed calories gone. And finally we pushed through the Whitewater section.
So about 8:30 in the morning, day 27. We're running behind schedule because we had a long stretch of just continuous rapids, obstructions, portaging, linings, canyons around waterfalls, all kinds of crazy stuff. Now we have to make it about 20 miles a day to get to our destination on time. Luckily, after this rapid you see behind me, the river won't be as demanding, but it's not going to be easy, so we really got to push. It's starting to get dark earlier now with September 9th today. We're losing light before 8 o'clock, so we're going to really have to push just to get up right at first light and get moving so we can get this trip done before winter closes in.
We get closer to what's the very final portage on the Adlatok River. It goes through a series of small waterfalls, beautiful canyon, and at this point we're basically breaking out of sort of the more interior treed country and into the northern Labrador coastal Inuit country where there's polar bears and rugged rock formations and no trees.
A lot of boulders down here, dude. Okay, straight. Oh, Jesus Christ, bro. I know, we just got pushed into it. There's another one coming.
day 27. Paddled good distance already, 35 kilometers. Now it's about 20 miles, maybe a bit more. Still trying to push on, hit a massive waterfall, portage the first part, ran the second part, lined the third part, and now we're about to run almost a mile-long Class 1 rapid. A lot of boulders in it, should be pretty fun, but you gotta be careful because you never know, sometimes it's the easy ones that could dump you. So we gotta be careful here. We tied down our stuff a little better when we were lining back there. We had a couple loose things on top of our spray deck, kept falling off, were a problem, so we bailed out. We tied those down better, we're ready to hit up this long rapid, hopefully put some more miles behind us today. Okay, draw. Hold it. Okay, cross draw. Back paddle. Oh shit. Okay, wait. Okay, get right here between these two. Cross draw. Nice. Okay, back paddle.
We get back into an area where the river's widening out. We're getting close to the end. Now we see some geese. Ted and Will try to jump shoot some geese. No luck, bummer.
Oh man, I think we just saw them too late. And when we tried to sneak up on them, getting the gun out, loaded and ready, we kind of spooked them a bit. They got into the water and took off earlier than we thought. We tried to paddle up, but I think they were on to us, so they flew away before we were even close to getting into range. So you win some, you lose some.
Well, that's how it goes, I guess. Just tried to get too close. The last ones we got, they let us get closer. Maybe these ones have been hunted before. Too bad, a little bit of a time waste. Would have been really nice to have some goose tonight. What are you gonna do though? Last couple days we've been trying to get some geese and just haven't had any luck. Can't get close to them. Right there, what we tried to do, the river's wide here. Ted and Will tried to paddle past them. They were on kind of a sand point. Then Marty and I were gonna paddle up to them and scare them so they'd fly down river, and Ted and Will would ambush them. No such luck. Ted and Will got within 200, 300 yards and spooked them. So maybe we're getting a little close to Hopedale, the community that we're finishing at, and they've been hunted here before. I don't know what it is, but we're just not having much luck. So looks like we're just gonna eat bannock for dinner tonight and go to sleep so we can get up first thing tomorrow, start the ocean paddle towards Hopedale. One last hurrah with some rapids tomorrow, and 3 days left after today, so the trip's winding down.
We're about to leave the river behind us. We see some geese. Ted and Will manage to pull a jump shoot, they're blocked by a point. They come around, boom, they get 2 geese. Yes, we have food.
I had one more shell, but I figured 2 was enough.
Yeah.
A little one.
Yeah, that's not bad. Some good meat on that. I wouldn't say that's too little.
Bigger.
Yeah, not bad, dude. Yeah, good job, guys.
Yeah, we saw some geese in the pond about 1,000 yards ahead, so we crept up on them, scared the first flock. The second flock stuck around. We got within range, waited for them to pop out of the water, which we did, and got an adult and probably a yearling or an adolescent. They'll be good in the fry pan.
One last hurrah for the Adlatok as the beach of the sea and it starts in
We're at our last portage before the ocean. I can almost see it through the trees to my left. Will got a couple of geese. That's gonna be tasty. Tough portage. Big drop here in the river, the last hurrah of the Adlatok. Then we'll leave it behind us as we make our way to Hopedale.
Last time we'll be doing this.
We start portaging this crazy, beautiful canyon, and at the base, we have our fly rods out. You know, Ted loses what's probably like a huge sea-run brook trout. I end up catching a 15.5-pound Atlantic salmon, which was like the craziest fight ever. We really needed the food. We brought it in. We didn't have a net on us. We brought it into the rocks. I like pounced on it. Ted grabbed it and ran it and like threw it up onto shore, and we all cheered.
6.5-pound whopper of a brook trout, just unbelievably huge. 6.5-pound brook trout.
You know, we end up having an epic feast. We're eating salmon, we're eating sea-run brook trout, we're eating wild goose, and we got all these fires. We have our main big fire that's keeping us warm. We have these side fires where we're cooking up fish and goose, and it's just like, had this huge epic feast. And like, talk about feast or famine. And it was really important that we needed this food, because after this, we were going to be out on the ocean where we could be windbound due to bad weather for days. And fortunately, it wasn't hot enough that, you know, we knew this food would keep, because it was so cold out by this time.
Stayed up till dark, which is at 7:30 nowadays, fishing on pretty much the last set of rapids on the Adlatok. 3 days of hard work, not enough food. You could feel your energies just sucking out of you. We're gonna just pig out today. It's gonna be great. And we'll be in Hopedale in 2 days after the ocean paddle.
Cutting up a goose, carving up one of the 2 geese. Jim managed to catch some Atlantic on a fly rod. Delicious. Right there is the brook trout.
Feels good to have some fish again, doesn't it?
Oh, a little seasoning. Beautiful. We got water boiling. It's good eating tonight.
Before and after.
So that was just like absolutely epic. And at that point, we busted out our backup water bottles. We carried extra water bottles because we knew that it could be challenging to get drinking water while we're traveling on the ocean.
Okay, so we're heading out onto the ocean today. So one of the things we're doing right now, while we still have the chance, is we're gonna fill up all our water bottles. That way we can have fresh water and we won't have to paddle way out of the way to get to a tributary that has some fresh water. Because as you know, you can't drink the salt stuff or the brackish. So this will ensure that we'll be good for a little while anyway.
There we are in a totally different country. We had to keep our eyes open for polar bears. We actually learned later that there was a polar bear just outside of the Hopedale, which was the community we were headed for.
In front of me right now is the mouth of the Adlatok. Behind me is the Labrador Sea. We're finished the river. We're heading to Hopedale, estimated 2-day paddle. Gonna be a tough paddle, a long paddle, but a beautiful paddle. Just paddling on the Labrador Sea, and I'm looking out at Ted and Will. They're making a big crossing. We finished it a bit first. I was hoping we'd stay a little bit more together, but we didn't. Some wind hit us. It seems like the weather can blow up really fast around here, and we ended up paddling in some big waves, white caps, surfing some waves, and I got a little bit worried about these guys behind me, but it looks like they're gonna make it safe and sound. But you should always remember to stay close together, because if one boat swamps or capsizes, you have the other boat right there to rescue the 2 guys and get to shore and get a fire going to warm up. Rigging up these paddles so when we get out in the wind, put our carpenter's garbage bag over them, catch that tailwind and sail. Easy effort.
right before we're at town, probably about 10K away or less from Hopedale, we can see a communication tower in the distance. The wind picks up, and we were dealing with some sketchy wind. Beautiful. We were seeing old stone blinds for whale hunting that were probably 400 years old. When we're windbound out on the point, we see a pod of minke whales coming by. We see the fins, and we're just watching these whales, which is super cool.
Well, we're a little bit trapped by winds about 2 miles from Hopedale. We're just hiding right now behind a big rock. Just around the corner, there's a blasting headwind. We might not be able to go. We might have to wait it out until this evening to cross to get over the Hopedale. Right now I'm just looking out over the Atlantic. We're in some islands which are giving shelter, but I can see right out to the horizon. Pretty amazing, rugged country we're in here. Let's hope the polar bears don't decide to come check us out.
We can't go anywhere, so we're on this point. There's a dead seal carcass on the beach. You know, we're a little worried about polar bears. There's no wood. We managed to find some kind of gnarly wood. We find like a broken, discarded homatic, which is a Inuit style toboggan, and we can burn that.
We're frying up the last bit of goose we had, and we're just waiting out this wind because it would be absolutely life-threatening to try paddling there right now. You can see the town from just on top of this hill. It's so close, but yet so far. So best to just wait it out. Hopefully the waves and the winds die down within a couple of hours.
So we cook up the last bit of our goose, which is the last bit of our food.
Things to do while waiting out the wind. Well, it can get pretty boring just sitting here trying to make a easy 3-mile crossing and being pinned down by weather. But one thing we have is a whole ton of 30-06 ammo left that we didn't shoot. We'll save a couple just in case we have to spend days here, which I doubt's gonna happen. So I figure we can pop these off and do a little target practice. Why not? Having to get our drinking water out of things like this and boiling it thoroughly afterwards. Now that's the only source of fresh water around here. Other than that, it's water everywhere, but not a drop to drink. Still on this point here, I think it's called Uviak Point. About 3 or 4 miles from Hopedale. We can see it in the distance when we climb this hill. Wind and waves are not changing. They actually look like they've gotten worse. It's going to be dark in a half hour. So we're setting up a tarp, we're cooking up some more food, and we're still waiting it out. If we have to sleep under the tarp, we will. And as soon as we see that weather break, we're just going to beeline for Hopedale because we're catching a ferry that leaves tomorrow evening. So we're cutting it pretty close here.
And we're watching the weather, but it's still windy. So I sleep out. I don't even bother putting the tent out. Me and Marty sleep out. I sleep by the fire, and we run out of wood, and I take the warm rocks of the fire and I tuck them in close to my body to keep me warm, and I keep waking up looking at the weather. Well, at the absolute crack of dawn, at very first light, it's still windy, but there's no big white caps on the ocean, and I realized that now's a window where we can make it across this bay because we're trying to get to our ferry.
Still below freezing. Woke up about half an hour ago, slept out by the fire, more or less sleeping in 10-minute intervals, watching the ocean, hoping that the winds would die down. It didn't die down all night. Finally, we caught a break. It's still pretty windy, but paddleable. So we sprung to action. We're loading the boats, and we're gonna head out there. I can see Hopedale, a big communications tower in the distance, about 3 miles away. So we're just gonna give her as hard as we can and get there because our ferry leaves town tonight. Looks like these winds could be picking up any minute though, so we better push.
The ferry is the only way to get back to the road system, which is the head of the Trans-Labrador Highway, which is an 8-hour drive on gravel to get back to Labrador City, where we first caught our train, where our truck is waiting for us in Labrador City. So if we miss that ferry, we're thinking it's going to be like another week till we can get a ferry again. So the ferry leaves at 9 a.m. So we wake up and we paddle, and that wind picks up and it's cold, and we just beast paddle across this bay right as the sun cracks over the horizon and over these mountainous islands. And I look back and I see Ted and Will paddling hard, and just the first bit of the sun cracking over the horizon as I look out to the Labrador Sea as just this incredible, challenging way to finish the trip. We round a point, the wind's still hard, but finally it dies right down, and we pull into Hopedale, Labrador early in the morning on day 33 and finish our trip. And wow, was it ever incredible. What a challenging but rewarding finish.
Yeah! We're in Hopedale. We finished. Really hard paddle this morning, blasting headwinds. But we made it safe and sound across the North Atlantic on an epic journey. Here we are in beautiful Hopedale, Labrador. We're in the land of the polar bear and the Inuit. We just completed a 300-mile epic canoe expedition that's as intense of a trip as anybody could dream up. Finally, we're back in civilization, filled our bellies at a restaurant, and are just enjoying this beautiful day before we board the ferry for a beautiful voyage down the Labrador coast.
What a trip it was. It had some of everything. Crazy whitewater, beautiful stretches of strong current where we could just cruise through the mountains, epic scenery, waterfalls, some of the most incredible fishing for the most majestic species of fish everywhere. We truly got a chance to live in part off the land by harvesting geese, by harvesting berries and fish, which was challenging, but you know, gave us a deeper connection to the land and taught us so much more about wilderness travel and survival. The different areas through the swampy country up by Atticamagen to the more rugged, rocky, mountainous country, the wildlife that we saw along the way, the caribou, learning about the George River herd and learning more about Labrador and just what an incredible place it is. Its human history, its natural history, its beautiful rugged scenery, just incredible. And we sailed the entire Labrador coast. We went all up to the rugged, most northerly community in all of Labrador, Nain. All these communities are way off the road system, only reachable by plane or ferry. Visiting some of these people and talking to some of these locals. We heard a story from Bertie Winters, who is 97 years old or something like that. He told us stories of polar bear hunting and dog sleds and from way back in the 1930s and before. Incredible experience. And finally, when this voyage was over, we got off the Northern Ranger, which was our ferry in Happy Valley Goose Bay, and we watched him sling our canoe off the boat, and our trip was officially over. And now we needed to take the 8-hour drive on the gravel Trans-Labrador Highway back to Labrador City, which is where we caught our train to start this whole adventure for the long drive home. I can't say enough things about this trip, except that even though it was the hardest canoe trip I've ever done, it was the most rewarding and my most favorite canoe trip of my entire life.